You wake up after 8 hours of sleep, and somehow you're still tired. Not sleepy, tired. There's a difference, and most people never stop to notice it. Sleepy is your body asking for rest. Tired is something else entirely. It's heavier. It sits behind your eyes and in your chest, and no amount of coffee seems to touch it. You tell yourself you just need an earlier night. So you go to bed earlier, and you wake up just as drained as before. Here's what's interesting. If exhaustion was purely physical, sleep would fix it every single time. But for millions of people, it doesn't. And that mismatch, that gap between how much rest you're getting and how tired you actually feel, is where this story really begins. Because the real reason you're always tired probably has very little to do with your bed. Think about it. Have you noticed that some days you feel completely wiped out even though you barely moved? You sat at a desk. You scrolled your phone. You answered messages. Nothing physically demanding happened. And yet by 6 in the evening, your body feels like it ran a marathon. Meanwhile, other days, you're on your feet for hours, moving, lifting, walking, and somehow you feel more alive at the end of it than you did at the start. That should not make sense, unless fatigue isn't really about your muscles at all. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it decision fatigue. Every choice you make during the day, no matter how small, uses a limited mental resource. What to wear, what to eat, whether to answer that email now or later, whether to say yes to your coworker, whether to keep scrolling or put the phone down. Each one seems tiny on its own, but your brain doesn't experience them as separate. It experiences them as one long, uninterrupted drain. Now here's the strange part. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a decision that matters and one that doesn't. Choosing what to eat for lunch pulls from the exact same mental fuel tank as choosing how to respond to a difficult conversation. By the end of the day, that tank is empty, whether you spent it on something meaningful or something completely forgettable. Imagine your mental energy as a phone battery. Every notification, every tiny decision, every unresolved thought is an app running quietly in the background. You don't see it. You don't feel it happening in the moment. But the battery drains anyway. And by evening, you're at 2%, wondering why a day that felt so uneventful left you this depleted. This is where most people get it wrong. They think fatigue is a sign of weakness or laziness, so they push harder. They drink more caffeine. They tell themselves to just power through. But pushing through mental fatigue is like pressing the gas pedal on a car that's already out of fuel. It doesn't move you forward. It just grinds something down. But wait, there's a deeper layer to this, and it explains why certain kinds of tiredness feel almost impossible to shake. Your brain evolved for a very different world than the one you're living in now. For most of human history, a day involved a manageable number of decisions. Where to find food, how to stay safe, who to trust. That was largely it. Your nervous system was built for a slower, more predictable rhythm of choices and rest. Now think about your average morning. Before you've even left your bed, you've likely made dozens of micro decisions. What to check first, what to reply to, what to ignore, what that message might mean, whether that read receipt means something. Your brain is running thousands of tiny calculations before you've even had breakfast, and none of it feels like effort because it's become invisible. It's just background noise. Except your nervous system still registers every bit of it as work. This is one possible explanation for why so many people report feeling exhausted despite doing what looks, on the surface, like very little. The exhaustion was never about physical output. It was about cognitive load. Now here's where the twist comes in, because this isn't only about decisions. It's about emotions too. Have you ever spent time with someone and left the interaction feeling completely drained, even though nothing dramatic happened? Maybe you were just being polite, smiling when you didn't feel like smiling, nodding along, keeping the conversation light while something heavier sat underneath. Psychologists call this emotional labor. It's the invisible work of managing your feelings to match what a situation seems to require. And it is exhausting in a way that almost never gets acknowledged, because from the outside, it looks like nothing happened at all. Your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for processing emotional threat and social danger, doesn't distinguish well between a genuine crisis and the quiet tension of pretending you're fine when you're not. Both register as effort. Both drain the same resource. So a day filled with small emotional performances, being upbeat at work, being patient with a friend, holding back an honest reaction, can leave you feeling as tired as a day of real hardship, even though nothing happened. That's only part of the story, though. There's another layer hiding underneath all of this, and it might be the most overlooked one. Attention itself is exhausting when it's constantly interrupted. Every time your phone buzzes, every time you switch from one task to another, your brain has to disengage from what it was doing and reorient itself to something new. Researchers who study attention have found that this switching cost is far from trivial. It takes real mental energy to redirect focus, and modern life asks you to redirect it constantly. A notification here, a thought about tomorrow's meeting there, a quick check of your phone in the middle of a task you were actually enjoying. None of these interruptions feel large in the moment, but your brain doesn't process them as small. It processes them as constant demands to refocus, again and again and again, hundreds of times a day. By evening, it isn't that you did too much. It's that your attention was pulled in too many directions, too many times, without ever fully settling anywhere. Now here's what nobody talks about. This kind of tiredness often gets worse, not better, with rest that isn't real rest. Scrolling on your phone at the end of a long day feels like relaxing. It isn't. Your brain is still making decisions, still processing new information, still reacting emotionally to what it sees. It's low effort, but it isn't restorative. This is why you can spend 2 hours on your phone after a hard day and somehow feel even more depleted than before you picked it up. Real rest, the kind your nervous system actually needs, often looks boring. Staring out a window, sitting quietly, walking without a destination. These moments feel unproductive, almost uncomfortable, because we've been conditioned to associate stillness with wasted time. But it's in that stillness that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and self-control, finally gets the downshift. It's the only time your mental battery actually recharges, instead of just switching to a different app in the background. Here's what's fascinating, though. This need for stillness isn't a modern weakness. It's an old, deeply human pattern that we've simply forgotten how to honor. For most of history, human days had natural pauses built into them. Long walks with nothing to do but think. Quiet evenings without artificial light demanding your attention. Silence that wasn't filled with anything. Your nervous system was designed around that rhythm. Periods of effort followed by genuine, unstimulated rest. We've kept the effort. We've almost completely erased the rest. And this is where the story becomes deeply personal. Because if you've ever felt guilty for needing a break, if you've ever pushed through exhaustion because resting felt like failure, that guilt itself might be part of what's keeping you tired. Some psychologists believe that the pressure to always be productive, to always be reachable, to always be on, has created a kind of chronic, low-grade vigilance in a lot of people. Your nervous system never fully powers down because some part of you is always anticipating the next demand, the next message, the next task, the next thing you're supposed to respond to. That's not laziness. That's a nervous system that has forgotten what safety feels like. And once you see it this way, your exhaustion stops looking like a personal flaw and starts looking like a completely understandable response to an environment that never stops asking for something. Here's the deeper meaning underneath all of this. Your tiredness isn't a mystery to be solved with more sleep. It's a message. It's your mind telling you that too many small things have been asking for your attention, your emotions, and your decisions all at once for far too long without enough space in between to recover. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing at rest. You are a person living inside a world that was never designed with your nervous system in mind, and somehow you've been keeping up anyway. That reframing changes everything. Because once you understand that your fatigue comes from decisions, emotions, and attention, and not simply from a lack of hours in bed, you start asking better questions. Not how do I sleep more, but where is my energy actually going? Not why am I so lazy, but what have I been carrying quietly all day that no one else can see? And once you start asking that question, you begin noticing all the invisible effort you've been putting in. The small decisions, the emotional smoothing over, the constant switching of attention. All of it adds up, silently, until it becomes the tiredness you feel by the end of the day. Understanding this doesn't fix everything overnight, but it does something important. It gives you permission. Permission to rest without guilt. Permission to protect your attention instead of letting everything interrupt it. Permission to stop treating stillness as wasted time and start treating it as the one thing your mind has been quietly begging for. And once you start giving your mind that space, even in small amounts, something shifts. The exhaustion doesn't just come from being asleep or awake. It comes from how full your mind has been the entire time in between. Once you understand that, you stop chasing more sleep and start protecting the quiet moments that actually let your mind exhale. Which raises another question, one that might explain even more about why some days feel unbearably heavy while others don't. It has to do with something called emotional residue. The way certain feelings don't just pass through you, they linger, quietly shaping every decision you make for hours afterward, long after the moment that caused them is over. And that, as it turns out, might be the real reason some days feel impossible to shake, even after they've ended.